Alright, I am back with another video, and today we are doing another modded build. Since my last one, a few more class and subclass mods have come out on BG3's official mod manager that's available in-game, and today we have one of my favourite subclasses, the Swashbuckler Rogue. And of course, Swashbuckler means we get to do another pirate build. This is technically my third one. My first one was a modded build as well that combined Swashbuckler Rogue with Blade Singer Wizard, and my other one was part of the Fortunate Four, which actually ended up being mostly a Valor Bard, which I thought was quite interesting. But here we've got a quite interesting combination here, and we'll get to that a bit later. But as soon as I thought of this like class and subclass combo, plus the name, the Kraken, I knew I had to do something pretty fun with it. And overall, this is an extremely fun playstyle. We'll get into why as I kind of get into the specifics of like, you know, what we're going to be taking and like the class features that come specifically from Swashbuckler, but this is probably one of the most fun playstyles I've ever been able to make, and honestly, just having access to these new classes and subclasses has just completely rekindled my spirit for doing these builds, because there are so many unique and interesting combinations, like I said. So I really hope you guys enjoy this one. I won't do too much preamble this time, but I think you guys are going to see pretty quickly where this build really starts to shine. So without further ado, let's get into it. I've decided to play a half-elf for today because I kind of wanted to make a drow for this build. I'm not 100% sure why, but like a drow pirate lord, or like pirate captain or something that like commands like sort of a, let's just say, morally ambiguous crew, I felt really interesting to me, and I would have gone a full drow, but half drow are the ones that get beards, and you can't really make a pirate without a beard, in my opinion at least. So I decided to go with a half elf drow, which is going to give us some abilities that I think will play into the kind of theme that we're going for later. Being a half elf and drow basically just means we're going to get all the usual half elf shtick, but with the drow's race magic built in. So for example, dancing lights, but any race will work with this build. Orc would be a really good one, or I should say half orc. Any of the elves, any of the humans, Githyanki would also actually work really nicely with this build, so feel free to kind of mix and match the racial choice here. This is just the personal thing that I wanted to go for. First up, for our class, we are going to be starting with Rogue. Usually when I use Rogue in a build, I want to start with it, because doing that gives us a ton of expertise. It still gives us all the weapon proficiencies that we want specifically for this build, and I just think that getting those extra skill proficiencies are just going to be more fun throughout your playthrough of the game. So I think starting off Rogue makes sense. Also, it's going to help with multi-classing, because when we multi-class into our other class in a minute, which is Warlock, surprise, surprise, you saw it in the thumbnail, but that's going to make it so that items will use our Charisma for the spell save DC, so that is something that we definitely want. So, kicking things off with Rogue, we're going to gain access to Sneak Attack. You all know what this does. As long as you have advantage against a target, you can do an additional bit of damage equal to your Rogue level. At the moment, it's only 1d6, but trust me, that'll go up in a minute. Anyways, as for our ability scores, they are a bit weird this time, but trust me, it makes sense. Dexterity is at 14. Well, this is a very middling score. I did want to focus more on Constitution for concentration saving throws, as well as Charisma, which is at an odd number because we will be using the Hair of Auntie Ethel to bump this up to an 18. Again, not exactly playing a morally good character, at the very least morally grey, so I don't think making a deal with a hag is exactly too far-fetched. So I wanted to make sure that we have good concentrations, as we are going to be using a lot of concentration-based spells in this build, and I wanted Charisma to be high. This leaves Dexterity at 14, which you could choose to bump up later with an ability score improvement if you like, but I actually have a feat that I think would work better for this build, as we'll get to a bit later. So yeah, we're definitely going to want the Auntie Ethel's Head to bump up Charisma to an 18. The rest of our points have gone into Wisdom, since those Wisdom saving throws can be pretty damn nasty. We don't need Intelligence or Strength for this build. For our proficiencies, as our background, I picked the Outlander background, giving us access to Athletics and Survival. For my skill proficiencies, I've gone for Deception and Intimidation, putting expertise into those, because again, that just makes sense. We're going to be a high Charisma character, and I feel like lying and, you know, just being intimidating is something a pirate would definitely be. Performance, we've gone for expertise, for proficiency in, I should say, because, come on, we're singing sea shanties. That is like rule number one of being a pirate, is you got to sing the sea shanties, and I want to be damn good at it, for crying out loud. Shame there's no room for a dip into Bard here. Or maybe there is. You can decide. But we've gone for Sleight of Hand as well, because come on, a pirate pickpocket does kind of make sense. We get Athletics and Survival from the Outlander background, and Survival definitely makes sense for a build like this. Athletics, it just kind of patches up our low strength. Right, I think the leveling scheme for this build is going to work if we take most of our multiclassing now. As much as I'd love to get into the rogue stuff, obviously that's what you guys want to see, I think the level progression for this build is going to benefit more from taking our multiclass as early as possible and taking all the levels in that multiclass as early as possible. So we're going to jump straight into Warlock, and come on, we're called the Kraken, we're a pirate. We're playing a great old one Warlock, and I am going straight up Cthulhian in this one. I want the big sea elder god to grace us with their infinite power and impossible form to grant us unique abilities to control the minds of our enemies and fill them with fear and awe. And I just punched my desk. I'm sorry if you heard that. I'm really hoping there's no audio issues in this video today, please. But anyways, Great Old One is going to fit really nicely for this build. It's going to give us a bunch of features that I think are going to be extremely fun overall. And while I'm on the topic, before I forget, I haven't included them for the purposes of testing in this video, but absolutely go all in on the psionic powers from the Tadpole in this run. Getting all of those psychic abilities feels perfectly on point for this character, and watching them slowly get corrupted visually from the Tadpole as well is going to look really, really nice. In fact, if you can't, I don't know if you can tell in the video, but I do have a very slight kind of tentacle tattoo around the eyes here to kind of represent that as well, but you can actually get it physically coming through your veins with the Tadpole powers, and I think the Tadpole powers would work so well here, but this build is super powerful without them anyway, so you don't really need them. But anyways, we are going to be going with the Great Old One subclass, which allows us to inflict fear with critical hits as long as the enemies fails their wisdom saving throw. Frightened is pretty damn good. It causes enemies to have disadvantage on ability checks and attack rolls, and they cannot move, which is going to be super good for making it so we are much harder to be hit. Like I say, we are working with a slightly lower AC than normal, but we have many ways of making it so enemies really shouldn't be able to hit us regardless. We're also going to gain access to 2 cantrips, and as usual with a lot of my Warlock builds, I'm not taking Eldritch Blast on this one. I don't really see a pirate as being an Eldritch Blaster, but if you wanted to go with that, you absolutely could. But of course I wanted to throw crossbows on this build, because again, I think of pirates, I think hand crossbows, so I've decided to go for that instead. But if you want to go for an Eldritch Blast oriented build for your ranged attacks, I'm not going to stop you. It still kind of fits the vibe quite nicely. I just wanted to use hand crossbows more, and it seems my community genuinely seems to agree that a Warlock build without Eldritch Blast is a bit more interesting than one with it. So we're going to be keeping it out of this build today. Instead, our main damaging cantrip is going to be Bone Chill, because this build is going to have a bit of a necrotic theme to it. And also, if you hit undead with this, it receives disadvantage on attack rolls. I mean, who doesn't love a little bit of undead bashing? We're also going to take Friends, because of course we are. Next up, for our spells, we get to choose 2, and of course we're taking Dissonant Whispers. We absolutely have to. A psychic damage attack that can potentially frighten creatures. It just makes too much sense not to bring. Your second one can be whatever you like. I'm going to be taking Charm Person for now, because normally Swashbuckler Rogue would be able to get Panache at level 9, which in this mod is basically casting an alternate version of Charm Person. So if you want the level, basically a less effective version of the level 9 Swashbuckler Rogue ability, you can pick up Charm Person here. Although this build will be a bit different than my other ones, because this one is going to actually replace spells quite a lot. So Charm Person is not sticking around for long. Next up, at Warlock Level 2, we are going to get another spell, and of course, we're taking Arms of Hadar. It's a necrotic tentacle attack. I mean, it's Cthulhu, come on, we're taking it. Next up, we do get to choose our Eldritch Invocations, and since we're not taking Eldritch Blast, we don't really need Agonizing or Repelling Blast either, so what are we going to take instead? Well, first of all, yes, we are going to take Devil's Sight to make it so that darkness, or magical or non-magical, no longer affects us, because, well, Drow get darkness anyway at level 5, so I do want to pick that up anyway, as well as the fact that we are going to be taking darkness as part of our spell list in this build, because darkness and Devil's Sight is going to be a really powerful combo here, which I know I just said I don't like to use Eldritch Blast as a crutch for Warlock builds, and Darkness Devil's Sight is a crutch, but let's be honest, we can have a little bit of fun with that anyway. And besides, we have plenty more interesting concentration options if you don't want to go down that route. I'm just presenting that this is going to be a powerful playstyle. If you're going to be trying this on like harder modes, like honor mode, you definitely want to at least have something that you know is going to be reliable, and Darkness Devil Sight is going to be that. My next choice is going to be Beast Speech for Speak with Animals, because, I mean, you got to talk to the parrot on your shoulder, or whatever animal companion you decide to bring with. Unfortunately, we're not going to be getting any version of Find Familiar in this build. Sorry, Pact of the Chain enjoyers. However, you could grab Scratch, or if you wanted to, you could grab a Shovel, which doesn't need Speak with Animals, but you could still grab it. I'd personally grab Scratch. I mean, come on, who doesn't want a dog companion? But Shovel would also work, or Basket, or Fork. Whoever they are to you. Anyways, at this level we are also going to get Fairy Fire, which is going to be a nice little extra spell to have. And again, we can replace the spell at this level if we like, but we're not going to just yet. Next up, at Warlock Level 3, we are going to gain access to our Level 2 spells. Now, it's entirely up to you what you want to take at this level, but we are going to be picking up 2 spells here. The first one is Crown of Madness, because of course we are. We're playing this like Cthulhian pirates. We absolutely need Crown of Madness to inflict madness. You know, sanity is a big thing in the Cthulhu mythos, as well as Call of Cthulhu's tabletop game if you play it. I highly recommend you do. But we're also going to be replacing that charm person from earlier, because I really don't feel like we need it anymore, especially when we have friends. So we're going to be picking up Darkness here now, to be kind of our main concentration option if we really need something that's going to be powerful. But of course, the other options that we're going to be picking up in this build are going to feel fun and thematic, and I would personally recommend using them instead if you want a more interesting playstyle, but Darkness and Devil Sight is still going to be kind of our bread and butter for when we really need that power. Next up, our Pact Boon. Obviously, there's the option of Pact of the Chain if you do want that familiar, Pact of the Tome if you want some extra spells, but we are going to be playing kind of a melee fighter playstyle, so I want Pact of the Blade to give us Bind Pact Weapon. This is going to allow us to use our Charisma for our weapon attacks, which is another reason why we're able to leave our decks a little bit on the low side. As far as level progression here goes, maybe you want to swap Dex and Con around, and maybe respec once you get to this point, so to make sure that you can still use your weapons effectively until now. But honestly, if you just focus on things like Necrotic or Bone Chill even, and just your other spells for like your damage, then you probably don't have to worry about it too much. This build is a bit of a spellcaster as well as sword fighter, so our Spellblade Gish type, Water Shocker, it's totally my favourite class anyway, but there you go. I feel like Pact of the Blade is going to work really, really nicely here, especially since Swashbuckler Rogue is meant to synergize with Charisma anyway. Next up, at Warlock Level 4, we're going to gain access to our first feat of the build. Now, at this point, you will absolutely have RTFL's Boon. I like to think that most players would get it around the level 4 to 5 range, so you have an 18 Charisma at this point. So in my opinion, I don't really see a reason to bump it up to 20 straight away. So let's take today's feat from this build. Now, you have a few options here. Obviously, Spell Sniper if you decide to go the Eldritch Blast route, Tough if you want more HP, Warcaster for advantage on concentration saving throws. That could be really, really nice, although we do have some equipment for that if you're interested. There's a ton of interesting things here. Ritual Caster if you really do want Find Familiar. There's a ton of different things you could do here. Resilient could give you proficiency in constitution saving throws if you want to maybe change the way your ability scores work instead. There's a ton of different things. Lucky would also make a lot of sense in this build, in my opinion, kind of like that like roguish tenacity coming forth in the form of luck, kind of like Jack Sparrow in Pirates of the Caribbean. There are so many different and interesting ways you could build this character with the feat, with this kind of open feat that we have, but I'm going to pick Defensive Duelist. Defensive Duelist is going to allow us to while we wield a finesse weapon that we are proficient with, we can use our reaction to add our proficiency bonus to our armor class. So even with that lower dexterity, thanks to the equipment that we'll be wearing plus this feat, we're going to have a pretty damn decent armor class score. Yes, it costs our reaction to use, which kind of sucks, but we are going to get the opportunity to kind of mitigate that as that kind of resource usage as well as we get further into the build. Personally, I like this a lot thematically, but if you don't feel like this is too much finagling just to get a semi-decent score in our dexterity, then feel free to swap dex and con around and pick something else. But I quite like this little thing. I don't know, the idea of like kind of getting that like rapier parry or dodge in the form of like an actual game mechanic just feels really nice. So this is going to be my personal choice here, and in my testing, it worked out pretty well. We do get to pick another cantrip at this point. I would say grab Mage Hand because it has a ton of uses, and we also do get to pick another spell at this level. And it's entirely up to you what you want to pick here. If you want to go for kind of like the Stormy Sea AC vibe, you could pick up something like Witch Bolt or Shatter. Both would be good options. Misty Step is also a really, really nice option here. And Mirror Image could also be good. Hold Person could also be good. There's so many options here. Pick whichever you think is great for you. At Warlock Level 5, we're going to get our Deepened Pact, which means now, as a Pact of the Blade Warlock, we now gain extra attack with our Pact weapon. So great, we're a full martial fighter. We also get to pick up another spell, and we do get access to level 3 spells at this point. And there's 2 that I want. Number 1 is Hunger of Hadar, another concentration option that's going to create a pool of darkness that's going to blind people within, dealing cold damage and acid damage as well at the end of their turn. Basically, this is like the briny like kind of abyss of the ocean opening up to swallow your enemies whole. 2 thematically fitting not to include on this build, and a great battlefield control spell as well to lock down certain areas of combat. I would also at this point replace a lower level spell that you feel like you may not be using anymore. I just chose Hold Person just as an offshoot, so I'm actually going to replace that with something else, and I personally am going to be picking Fear, because of course I am. This is a Cthulhu-based inspired build. If I don't take Fear, I've made a mistake. We also do get to pick another Eldritch Invocation, and I'm going to pick up Maya the Mind for the slow spell, one of the most powerful battlefield control spells in the game, and one of my personal favourites, being able to target up to 6 creatures and slow them, basically meaning that they can only use an action or a bonus action each turn, and the AC and dexterity saves are reduced by 2, which means we're going to be hitting them pretty damn hard, and it's great for the whole party, because when something like Hunger of Hadar is great, it does stop our close range allies from being able to get in there without getting hurt, whereas slow doesn't. So we, at this level, have just gained like 3 amazing battlefield control options. Can't go wrong with that. And with that, I'd say we're all done with our Warlock levels. Entropic Ward is an okay feature, but I personally don't really care for it here, so I want to get into what you've all been waiting for, the Rogue levels. At level 2 of Rogue, we're going to be able to hide, dash, and disengage as a bonus action. Always great to have. And finally, at level 3, it's here. The Swashbuckler Rogue. Swashbuckler is going to allow us to focus our training on the art of the blade, relying on speed, elegance, and charm in equal parts. While some warriors are brutes clad in heavy armor, your method of fighting looks almost like a performance. Duelists and pirates typically belong to this archetype. At level 3, we're going to get some pretty goddamn cool abilities. Number 1, we're going to get fancy footwork. If you move after making a melee attack, you don't provoke opportunity attacks from your target. This is going to allow you to step out of range of a big enemy that's staring you down pretty damn easily. I found that this really helped with dealing with Steel Watchers. Being able to attack them and dash away, meaning that they had to dash to keep up, meant that single big enemies like that actually had a really hard time dealing with me, which was very, very important. We also have access to Rakish Audacity Initiative. Your confidence propels you into battle. You can give yourself a bonus to initiative rolls equal to your charisma modifier. Well, this just means that we're pretty much always going to be going first, which is pretty damn nice. As well as we also gain Rakish Audacity Sneak Attack, meaning that we gain an additional way to use our sneak attack. You can now perform sneak attacks if there are no other enemies within 5 feet of the targets you are attacking. So basically this adds 2 new sneak attacks that you can see here. You just basically remove the old ones from your hotbar and put these ones on instead. There was a good reason for not just replacing the sneak attack entirely so it doesn't conflict with other mods. But this is going to allow us to use 2 new sneak attacks. Now, normally in tabletop, Rakish Audacity only works with melee weapons, but the mod author thought, well, actually, let's keep things in line with how BG3 has handled things and give it to ranged weapons as well, which I actually think is really cool, and there's another reason I didn't want to just go with Eldritch Blast, so we could actually take advantage of this. Well, we don't actually need advantage to take advantage of this. That's the whole point of Swashbuckler. It's a really fun subclass, and I think it's perfect for this build, so let's keep going. At level 4 of Rogue, we are going to get to take another feat, and at this point at around level 9, I say let's grab that ability score improvement to bump up our charisma to a total of 20 with Auntie Ethel's hair. However, if you feel like you want to wear something that might boost your charisma, or something like the Mirror of Loss in order to do so as well, maybe you might think that you might actually put the hair of Auntie Ethel into something else and put those points into somewhere else. Again, you can optimize this how you like, but this is kind of the basic way of doing it for most players who don't want to go through extra faff. Next up at level 5, we're going to be able to grab Uncanny Dodge. Whenever an attack hits you once per round, I believe, you only take half the usual damage, so we're a bit tankier. Next up, at level 6 of Rogue, we get to pick 2 skill expertise, and the game has picked Sleight of Hand and Performance, and I'm not one to argue. Now, at level 7 of Rogue, which is what I personally used for testing and I will be taking for this build, you get Evasion, which allows you to take half damage on a successful dex save and no damage. Sorry, let me reread that. Whenever a spell or effect would deal half damage on a successful dex save, it deals no damage if you succeed and only half damage if you fail. So basically, between that and Uncanny Dodge, we're going to be pretty damn tanky, and for a frontline fighter like a Swashbuckler, that's going to be awesome for us. So even if our defensive duelist isn't quite enough to get our AC up to prevent an attack, we're still going to be pretty damn tanky overall when it comes to damage from spells and and attack rolls, I guess. But there is technically a little bit of room for a 1-level multi-class into something if you decide. I like going to level 7 of Rogue because this does push us up to the next tier of sneak attack damage, so if we want to get the most out of our sneak attacks with Swashbuckler, we absolutely do. I recommend level 7, but let's go over some level 1 dips that you may find useful. Fighter obviously is a good one, giving you the dueling fighting style if you want a little bit more damage. Also, Second Wind is there as well. Another thing that could be good for you might be Bard, if you want to grab Vicious Mockery to do some pirate taunting shenanigans, as well as some other useful abilities. And the ability to use an instrument which would allow you to whistle, so you'll be singing them sea shanties. There's also something like War Cleric if you want bonus action attacks, Barbarian if you want Rage, although I personally don't recommend that for this build since I quite like the spellcasting. Sorcerer could be fun to fit in there if you want maybe some Wild Magic or some Storm Sorcery, getting a few Lightning and Thunder based attacks to really lean into that like sea aspect. There's a ton of different things you can do here, but I'm going to keep it a bit simple and just stick with the 7th level of Rogue today, but feel free to experiment. That level of Storm Sorcerer does sound quite tempting now that I think about it. Maybe starting with Storm Sorcerer for the Constitution saving throw proficiency. Who knows? I'll let you decide. Ooh, let's get a nice shot of the docks. There we go. Well, that is the build, and overall what you're going to be getting out of this is a pretty damn cool combination of spells and abilities with martial fighting. Thanks to our newly found sneak attacks, which are here and here, you're basically going to be constantly getting sneak attack damage off as long as you're able to isolate your enemies, which in this game I find if you're playing with a full party does tend to happen quite a bit, as NPCs like to split up their attack patterns usually. And so you're going to have a lot of opportunities to deal massive damage with Rakish or Dashly while still getting extra attack. And all of it is done with your charisma, meaning that your spell save DCs are also going to be very high. For things like Slow, like we said, Crown of Madness, Dissonant Whispers, you're going to be inflicting fear quite a bit. And psychic damage is a pretty good thing to deal, as well as necrotic damage, because unless you're up against very specific types of enemies, it's not going to get resisted very often. And also we have things like Hunger of Hadar for cold and acid damage, so you have a wide range of damage options available to you. Overall, I really like this kind of skill set. Unfortunately, as a Warlock, we do have limited spell slots, but they do come back on a short rest, and since your concentration spells are probably mostly what you're going to be casting with this build, and they will last quite a while, provided you don't drop that concentration, you don't have to worry too much. I've also included a lot of spells through our equipment that won't be using those spell slots, although they have a long rest restriction, they're still there. So I feel like you're not going to have too much issue with the kind of Warlock's limited spell slots with this build. But regardless, let's get into the equipment. So some obvious choices here for a build like this. Let's get some of the obvious ones out of the way. Namely, our endgame weapon, the Duelist Prerogative. It's literally a pirate's rapier in the lore. It just makes too much sense. The Duelist Prerogative is going to improve our playstyle in so many ways. We're going to get It's a +3 legendary weapon that comes with a built-in extra d4 of necrotic damage. Awesome. It also is going to allow us to, while our offhand is empty, score a critical hit when rolling a 19 or higher, so we have a higher chance to crit. Amazing. And I really, really like that for this build. I feel like a Swashbuckler Rogue is the one that kind of, like, you know, does some fancy footwork, sidesteps, parries, deflects, looking for that perfect opening to strike with precision. And to me, that is signified by a critical hit, or the sneak attack as well. So combining a little bit of the two, sneak attacks and critical hits for massive damage, is kind of what I wanted to get with that kind of fighting style, and trust me, we've got it here. Moreover, we also gain an additional reaction, so that's going to fuel a feature from this weapon, which I'll get to in a minute, but it's also going to fuel things like Defensive Duelist, allowing us to do it up to twice per turn if necessary, as well as a bunch of other things like we can do 2 opportunity attacks if we want. There's just so much cool stuff that comes from having 2 reactions, so I'm quite happy to have that here. We also gain Withering Cut, which allows us to want to hit with a melee weapon. We use our reaction to deal necrotic damage equal to our proficiency bonus. So you can use one of those 2 reactions we get to just add more damage, which is great. So we can either use our reaction to bump our EC equal to our proficiency bonus, or deal more damage equal to our proficiency bonus. It all just fits together so perfectly. Next up, we also gain Challenge to a Duel, allowing us to challenge an enemy to attack only us, inflicting bleeding on them, which is really awesome. We have the spell Dominate Person here, which I found combining Dominate Person with Challenge to a Duel actually worked really nicely, because you can prevent your dominated ally from being attacked, meaning that they just get to do whatever they want while you're here dodging attacks with our Defensive Duelist and Darkness and whatever have you. That's the big combo here. Casting Darkness, then using Challenge to a Duel to force them to come to attack you in the darkness so they rarely ever hit you is a pretty mean combo. Not to mention Challenge to a Duel also inflicts a condition on the enemy, which we'll get to in a minute. We're also going to get access to Duelist Enthusiasm, meaning that we can now also attack as a bonus action once per turn, meaning that we have 3 attacks in a turn. That's pretty damn cool. Overall, this weapon is absolutely perfect for our playstyle. It does everything we want and more. It just enables everything in this build to be at its absolute peak. But of course, this is an Act 3 weapon. A weapon I would recommend for the early game is the Sword of Screams, obtainable very early on in the Underdark. It's a regular rapier with no +1 or +2 to it, but you can change that, and it comes with a built-in D4 of psychic damage, which just makes sense for a build like this. I would also recommend, if you want to, I didn't do it for my testing, but you absolutely can with this build, is that I would recommend that you buff either the Sword of Screams or the Duelist Prerogative when you get it, with either lightning or thunder damage from the Drakethroat Glaive, as that is going to synergize with some other equipment that you can see on the left there. Speaking of, let's get to the rest of the equipment. First up, the crossbows. I did decide to throw dual crossbows on this build, because if you're going to have one, you might as well have 2, just on the off chance that the bonus action attack will work. Unfortunately, we don't have 2-weapon fighting with this build, so the offhand crossbow attacks aren't going to be dealing nearly as much damage as they normally would, but hey, if you've got nothing else going on with your bonus action, for example, maybe you don't have the Duelist Prerogative yet, or there's just an enemy that's a bit far away and you don't have anything to do with your bonus action, you could just take a pot shot. Any damage is better than no damage. But these 2 crossbows also do come with extra effects, like the ability to potentially inflict burning, and the ability to cast Scorching Ray and Magic Missile, which is always good. And the fact that the near misser does pure force damage makes it great for taking down objects. There's a particular very hard boss fight towards the end of the game, which actually makes great use of the near misser, so recommend having that. Let's get into the actual armor pieces now. First up, you have a few choices here, but my first choice and the early game choice is the Diadem of Arcane Synergy. Whenever you inflict a condition, you gain Arcane Synergy for 2 rounds. Arcane Synergy adds additional damage to your weapon attacks equal to your spellcasting ability modifier. Of course, we do everything with our charisma anyway, so this is just a flat buff to everything that we do as far as damage is concerned, and it's basically the early game option for a lot of Spellblade builds. We have tons of ways of inflicting conditions to trigger Arcane Synergy, such as Challenge to a Duel, Slow, Crown of Madness. Bone Chill can even inflict the Bone Chill condition, which prevents the target from healing. Dissonant Whispers inflicting Frightened. Darkness inflicting Blinded. Fear inflicting, well, Frightened as well. Even Hunger of Hadar inflicts Blinded, which can affect this, so you're gonna constantly have Arcane Synergy up. However, there are 2 more options that I could recommend for the late game. First up is the Birthright, which boosts our Charisma by 2 up to 22. If you feel like you want to put that ability score improvement we took earlier into something else, or just kick your Charisma into overdrive, then there's absolutely nothing wrong with this hat. It's probably the closest we're going to get to a pirate-looking hat anyway, but personally I don't think it's really that good for trying to make a pirate hat. At least in my opinion, I think it looks a bit off, so we won't be using that here. But the other one is the Gibbous of the Worshipful Servant, giving you momentum equal to your Charisma modifier at the start of combat, meaning that you're going to have more movement speed for being able to dodge in and out and maneuver around the battlefield, which is really, really good. But it also gives you advantage on concentration saving throws, which means that your control spells are more likely to remain up. So it's up to you. Do you want a consistent source of extra damage, a consistent source of ability score improvement, I guess, or a consistent way to maintain your powerful control spells? If it was down to me, I'd probably take the Gibbous of the Worshipful Servant, but I know people like big numbers, and I think most people would go with the Diadem of Arcane Synergy, but I do think the Worshipful Servant is a bit better, in my opinion. But let's get into the rest of the stuff. First up, the Nymph Cloak. This is just a cloak that's going to give us Dominate Person. Because we didn't take high enough levels in Great Old One Warlock to be able to get some of the more powerful high-level control spells that come with that class, I managed to get most of them from items anyway, at least the ones that I would absolutely be picking, and Dominate Person is one of those, which is super, super good. Unfortunately, it is only once per long rest, but being able to just take over an enemy even once per long rest is more than enough. Next up, we have the Ballist Armour. This is basically just here to be the power move if you don't mind murdering someone to get it. Enemies within 2 meters become vulnerable to piercing damage unless they are resistant or immune to it. This is potentially double damage on all of our rapier attacks, which is just absolutely massive. We also gain a +2 bonus to initiative rolls, so we're pretty much guaranteeing between this and Rakish Audacity that we're just going to be getting... We're going to be going first in pretty much every combat, which is great for setting up control spells, as well as, you know, being able to just get an early, powerful attack in, maybe even taking out an enemy in one hit with a powerful sneak attack. So there's that for you. But the other options are, if you don't want to be evil, but you want a similar looking armor that has a similar effect, go for the Elegant Studded Leather, giving you a +2 bonus to initiative rolls, advantage on stealth checks, as well as the ability to use the shield spell once per short rest, which means that you won't necessarily having to be using Defensive Duelist all the time. So you might want to, if you decide to go with that armor, you might want to swap Defensive Duelist out for something else, but again, that's up to you. This person in the background of the character is kind of staring at me really awkwardly. They're just kind of looking at the camera, and I would like them to stop, please. I don't think they're going to. Oh dear. Anyways, but for an early game option, I recommend the Spider Silk Armor, giving you a +1 bonus to stealth checks, but also advantage on Constitution saving throws, which includes concentration. So this is a really easy to get early game light armor that you could just slap on to make it so that your control spells that you'll be getting from those early levels of Warlock are more likely to stay up. So if you really like the idea of being able to maintain concentration a lot easier, the Spider Silk Armor is great, and then the Worshipful Servant can replace it later on. Next up, my gloves of choice here are the Gloves of Belligerent Skies. Whenever we deal thunder, lightning, or radiant damage, we inflict 2 tons of reverberation on the target. Now, we don't have a source of thunder, lightning, or radiant damage, normally. But again, like I say, if you use the Drakethroat Glaive to buff your main hand weapon with thunder or lightning, then you'll be able to get this effect off constantly. I forgot to do it for my testing in this build, but I was still able to use reverberation quite consistently without it, but this is still a decent early game option. However, if you want to swap that out for something like the Haraknir Braces, which are going to allow you to cast Mage Hand as a bonus action and give you access to the Telekinesis spell, which is another great old one Warlock spell that we haven't actually got, I would recommend this too. It's a really fun control spell that I really enjoy using, and you can use it once per short rest, not once per long rest, so you're going to have access to this pretty much constantly. It's basically a Warlock spell for us, which is great. A Warlock spell that doesn't take up a spell slot. And finally, we have, for your boots, we have the Boots of Stormy Clamour. Whenever the wearer inflicts a condition upon a hostile creature, they also inflict 2 turns of reverberation. So we're going to be inflicting conditions all the time, like I said. It's similar to the Diadem of Arcane Synergy, meaning we just get to spread reverberation for free, which can be really good for us. And again, it kind of gives us that stormy vibe of like cracking thunder as we attack. Such like that, like the stormy sea follows us wherever we go. So I quite like the reverberation combo here and would definitely recommend it, but there's another option for the boots, and that is the Line Breaker boots. I thought these were going to be patched in patch 7, but I don't feel like they have been. Once per turn, when you dash, which we can do as a bonus action, you gain Wrath for 2 turns. Wrath, gives us a +1 to damage with melee weapons for every turn of the condition remaining. So for just dashing as a bonus action, you can gain more damage on your weapons, up to 7 stacks, which is a +7 damage increase. That's almost Great Weapon Master. But with these boots, there's no once per turn limit, which they're supposed to be, and it also gives 3 turns of Wrath, not 2. There was no change in the wiki to say that this has been patched, but if it has, let me know. But as far as I understand, there wasn't anything in the patch notes about it, so I think these boots are still good to go at full power, which means this is a very, very powerful combo if you want to go down that route. And finally, for the kind of fashion here, I am using the Citizens Outfits mod, which comes with the long coat and the camp boots, and I've coloured it in black and azure to give us that kind of piratey feel. But yeah, that is the build, and overall, it's amazing. It does a ton of damage, it's a really fun, thematic playstyle which sticks to an interesting theme, and that can only get more powerful. In the footage you see here, I only have 19 charisma, so technically that can be more powerful. I'm not using any of the psionic abilities that I recommended, so it can be even more powerful there. There is just so much to this build. I cannot stress it enough. There's so many different strategies you can use. It has battlefield control, it has damage, it has defensive utility. It's just, I love it. I absolutely love this build. Oh, the accessories! I totally forgot. We have the Strange Tendril Amulets to give us Evard's Black Tentacles once per long rest, because of course we do. And Evard's Black Tentacles deals a bit of bludgeoning damage, turning the area into difficult terrain and inflicting the smothering condition, which makes it so that entities have disadvantage on dexterity saving throws and attack rolls, and attack rolls have advantage against them. So it's kind of like, it's almost kind of like blinded in a way. Well, we've also gone with the Killer's Sweetheart Ring to be so that whenever we kill a creature, our next attack roll will be a critical hit once per long rest. So the way this ring works is a bit misleading. It's actually a reaction that you can bank to spend whenever you like to instantly do a critical hit. You can just save it, which is really, really cool. And finally, the Strange Conduit Ring. We're going to be concentrating on spells quite a lot, so it makes all of our weapon attacks deal an extra 1d4 psychic damage while concentrating. There you go. Sorry, I've been forgetting to do the accessories a lot lately, but yes, that is the build, and as I said, you're just getting a bit of everything here. It does everything really well, the flavour and the theming is really fun, it combines two classes that I think work really, really nicely together with these features. I just love it. I would say if you're playing the level 20 mod, and you want to make a level 20 version of this build, go to, I would probably say, level 9 of Rogue, and then put the rest of the levels into Warlock, just to get more spell slots, more control spells, and the Panache feature from level 9 of Swashbuckler, because why not? And it will bump up your sneak attack damage as well. But yeah, if you can't tell, my voice is starting to go because I still haven't quite recovered from my cold yet, so I think I will end it here. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.